And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Well, on tonight's chart, we've got a stronger system here pushing into the western Aleutians. Later tonight to tomorrow, we'll bring gale force winds into the central Aleutians with snow changing to rain for those areas. Otherwise, we've got this weaker system pushing in toward the Queen Charlotte Islands, keeping it unsettled for the Panhandle. And for the coastal water forecast here on the south coast, southeast winds 20 to 35 knots, and on the north coast here, east-southeast 15 to 25 knots. Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay, Stevens Passage winds north at 20 and southeast 20 for Clarence Strait. Outlook for the Saturday time, south to southeast winds 20 knots on the south coast, central coast, small craft advisories east at 25 there, and north to northeast 10 to 15 knots up to the north. And small craft advisories now for the central northern inner channel areas here, Stevens Passage, Lynn Canal, and other areas, for northeast winds at 25 knots, Clarence Strait southeast at 20. Prince William Sound, east winds 10 knots. North Gulf Coast, east-northeast 15 knots. Barren Islands, Kamishak Bay, east at 20. Cook Inlet, northeast at 15 to 20 knots. And for Saturday, north winds 10 to 20 knots here for the inlet. Northwest 30 knots for Kamishak Bay. West 30 for the Barren Islands, light northerlies for Prince William Sound, light variable winds for the eastern North Gulf Coast, and west at 25 here for the western coast. And for Kodiak Island, east winds Friday 15 to 20 knots, Alaska Peninsula north winds 20 to 25 knots, and north at 15 for Bristol Bay. And then for Saturday, northwest winds 20 knots for the peninsula as well as Bristol Bay, and west-northwest at 25 for Kodiak Island. Eastern Aleutians, north winds for the day Friday at 25 knots, Adak-Anatka, northwest at 25, that extends all the way out to Amchitka. Kiska westward, south to southwest, 20 to 30. And then stronger winds coming in on Saturday with that system here pushing eastward, bringing gale force winds all the way into Adak-Anatka at 40 to 45 knots. Otherwise, for the eastern Aleutians, winds south to west at 30 to 35 knots. For the southwest coast, north to northwest winds 15 to 20 knots, north at 20 for the Pribilofs, northwest 20 for St. Matthew Island, and Norton Sound and St. Lawrence Island, winds will be out of the north at about 15. Then for Saturday, light winds up here, Norton Sound, as well as St. Lawrence Island, Yukon Delta coast, all northwest 10 to 15 knots. Northwest at 20 for the Kuskokwim Delta coast, and northwest 30 for St. Matthew Island, but southwest 20 for the Pribilofs. And for the Arctic coast tomorrow, we've got east to northeast winds 30 to 35 knots, Chukchi north to northeast at 20 knots. And for Saturday, Chukchi northeast to northwest 10 to 20 knots. Brisk wind advisories for the Arctic coast for east to northeast winds at 20 to 30 knots.